I never thought my own sister would stab me in the back with a paintbrush, but there I was, standing in front of a massive painting I had poured my soul into, only to see her smiling in front of it, pretending it was hers. My name wasn't anywhere, not in the brochures, not on the little plaque by the frame, just hers. And to make things worse, she was soaking in the applause like she belonged in that spotlight. I felt like I was sinking into the ground, my chest tight, my eyes burning. I wanted to scream, but no one would have believed me. She was their golden girl, and I was just me. Quiet, soft-spoken, the one who always stayed in the background. But not this time. This time I was going to tell the whole story. It all started a few months ago. I'm 17, still in high school, and art is everything to me. Ever since I could hold a pencil, I was sketching on napkins, notebooks, walls, anything I could get my hands on. My room is filled with canvases, pencils, charcoal, and an old easel my grandfather gave me. My sister Natalie is 21, beautiful, charismatic, and always the center of attention. She's in college, studying marketing, and she's always known how to talk her way into anything. We used to be close. She'd braid my hair, steal my clothes, and give me advice about boys. I looked up to her like she was untouchable, but I never thought she'd look down on me enough to steal from me. Things at home were normal, or at least they seemed to be. Mom worked long hours as a nurse, and Dad traveled a lot for work, so Natalie and I had the house to ourselves most days. I spent those quiet hours painting, experimenting with colors, trying new techniques, sometimes losing track of time completely. I kept my best pieces stored away in a locked cabinet in my room. Pieces I planned to submit to a local gallery's youth exhibition. It was a big deal, one that could lead to scholarships, recognition, maybe even a future in art. I'd been working on them in secret for nearly a year. One day, Natalie walked into my room without knocking. She always did that, brushing it off like it was no big deal. She saw the canvases spread out across my bed and her eyes lit up. I could tell she was impressed. She picked up one of my favorite paintings, a surreal, haunting portrait of a girl with flowers blooming from her eyes, and stared at it like it was gold. She didn't say anything, just smiled, said I was getting better, then left. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just happy she noticed. A few weeks later, something weird happened. I came home from school and noticed my cabinet key was missing. I always kept it hidden inside an old book on my shelf, but the page it was tucked in had been moved. My heart sank. I opened the cabinet and did a quick count. Everything seemed in place, until I noticed 2 of my best pieces were gone. I panicked, thinking maybe I moved them and forgot. But I'm not that careless. I asked Natalie if she had seen them, and she shrugged, said maybe I misplaced them, then changed the subject. Her tone was off, but I didn't press it. Then came the night of the gallery event. I wasn't planning to go. I'd missed the submission deadline. At least I thought I had. My mom got free tickets through work and dragged me along. She said it would be good for me to see other artists, get inspired. The gallery was beautiful, lit up with warm lights, people dressed in suits and dresses, sipping champagne and murmuring about brushstrokes and themes. I walked through the rooms, admiring the work until I froze. There in the center of one of the main walls were my paintings. Mine, the ones that had gone missing. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone copied my style. But no, every detail was exactly the same. I stepped closer, heart racing. My initials were gone. In their place, a small silver plaque read, Artist Natalie Rivers. My sister's name. My head started spinning. I looked around, trying to find her. And then I saw her. Natalie, in a sleek black dress, laughing with a group of people. She was holding a glass of champagne and talking to a man with a notepad, probably a critic or curator. She was basking in the attention like she was born for it. I wanted to run. I wanted to cry. But more than anything, I wanted to confront her right there. I walked up to her, trying to stay calm. She looked surprised to see me, but recovered quickly. "Hey, you made it," she said as if nothing was wrong. I asked her what she was doing, why my paintings were on display with her name. Her smile tightened. She said I was being dramatic, that she submitted them for me because I was too shy, and the gallery wouldn't take pieces from someone under 18. She said it was a favor. A favor. I couldn't believe it. She had taken my work, claimed it as her own, and now she was twisting it like she'd done me a kindness. I tried to argue, but she pulled me aside and whispered sharply in my ear, "If you make a scene, you'll embarrass both of us. Just let this go. It's not a big deal." I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking. I walked away, past the people complimenting her, past the gallery owner who nodded politely at me, not knowing I was the real artist. I sat outside on the curb and tried not to cry. That night I didn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, her lies, the smug way she smiled, the way she made me feel invisible. I thought about telling our parents, but Natalie always had a way of spinning things. She'd say I was jealous or confused. She'd probably cry, turn it into a story about how she was just trying to help me, and they'd believe her. They always did. She was the one with straight A's, the charm, the big dreams. I was just the weird art girl. But something inside me shifted that night. I wasn't going to let her take this from me. Not my art, not my identity, not my future. I started gathering proof. Photos of my progress, sketches, timestamps, even old videos of me painting. I created a portfolio, documenting every brushstroke I had made on those canvases. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I needed it, and I knew this wasn't over, because Natalie might have stolen my moment. But she didn't know who she was messing with. And the next time we met at a gallery, it wouldn't be under her name. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my chest I hadn't felt before. Not anger exactly, something deeper. A mix of betrayal and desperation, like something important had been ripped out of me. I looked around my room at the unfinished canvases, the brushes in their jar, the paint smeared on my desk. It all felt tainted now, like Natalie had reached into my world and painted over it with her lies. I didn't want to feel powerless anymore. I was done being the quiet one. If she wanted to pretend to be me, I was going to remind her who she was stealing from. I started my day like normal, brushed my hair, got dressed, went to school. But the whole time, my thoughts were racing. I couldn't concentrate. I barely listened in class. I just kept going over everything she said. If you make a scene, you'll embarrass both of us. No, she didn't get to control the narrative. I had spent years working on my art, and she took the credit in one night. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about truth, and about standing up, even if your voice shakes. That afternoon, I skipped my usual art club meeting and went straight home. Natalie wasn't there, probably out celebrating her fake success. I went to my room and locked the door. I pulled out every sketchbook I had, dating back to when I was 11. I flipped through the pages, gathering evidence. Drawings of faces, animals, surreal dreamscapes, all with dates and little notes in the margins. I found photos of the missing paintings at earlier stages, some with me holding them up proudly. I even had a video on my phone of me painting the exact piece she stole. Proof. Real, undeniable proof. The next step was harder. I didn't want to involve anyone yet. Not my parents, not teachers. I needed someone who wouldn't just listen but would believe me, and who had a reason to care. That's when I thought of Mr. Deacon, the art teacher at school. He'd seen my work evolve over the years. He knew my style. Maybe he could help. Maybe he could confirm that the paintings were mine. The next morning, I brought my sketches and my portfolio to school. My hands were sweating as I waited outside his classroom. When he saw me, he smiled warmly like always, but his expression changed when he saw the stack of papers in my arms. I told him I needed to talk, really talk. He let me in and closed the door behind us. I laid out everything on his desk, piece by piece, explaining what had happened. My voice was shaking, but I didn't stop. He listened silently, nodding, studying the art. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then he looked at me and said, "These are yours." No doubt about it. That one sentence felt like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. With Mr. Deacon's support, I felt stronger. We talked about what I could do, contact the gallery, maybe go public. But I wasn't ready for that yet. I wanted to give Natalie a chance to fix it herself. A part of me still hoped she'd feel guilty, that she'd realize what she'd done and come clean. So I left a note on her pillow that night. "We need to talk. I know what you did." She came into my room an hour later, acting like nothing was wrong. She sat on my bed, legs crossed, and smiled like we were best friends again. "What's up?" she asked, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I didn't answer right away. I just pulled out my phone and played the video, the one of me painting the stolen piece. Her smile faded. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back again. "Okay," she said slowly. "So what? I used your paintings. You weren't going to submit them anyway. I just gave them a chance." I stared at her in disbelief. "You stole from me," I said. "You lied, and you took credit for something I created." She sighed and stood up, pacing the room. "Look, people liked the work. It's not like I made money off it. It was for a charity show. Chill out. It's not that deep. But it was. It was my identity, my soul on that canvas, and she wore it like a costume. I told her I had proof, that I'd spoken to Mr. Deacon, that I was going to the gallery if she didn't make things right. Her eyes narrowed. "You're really going to ruin this for me?" she snapped. "You always get to be the special one in your little art world. For once I wanted to shine." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the paintings. It was about jealousy, about years of being compared, of her feeling overshadowed in ways I never knew. But stealing my work? That wasn't how you fix insecurity. I gave her a choice, confess or I would. She didn't answer right away. She just left my room without saying another word. I didn't know what she would do, but I knew what I had to do. The next day I went back to the gallery, not as a guest, but with a folder in my hands and truth in my voice. I asked to speak with the curator, a tall woman named Evelyn with sharp glasses and a sharp mind. I told her everything. I showed her the video, the sketches, the time-stamped photos. At first, she was skeptical, but as she flipped through the pages and watched the footage, her face changed. She didn't say much, just asked me to wait. She left the room for a few minutes, and when she came back, she told me she believed me, that she had questions for Natalie, that they would handle it. That night, Natalie came home furious. She stormed into my room, yelling that I humiliated her, that I ruined everything, that she was this close to being offered a feature in the gallery's next show. I told her I didn't care about her opportunities, only my truth. She slammed the door behind her and didn't speak to me for 2 days. Mom and Dad noticed the tension, but we didn't explain. Not yet. I was still processing everything, still unsure what came next. Then something unexpected happened. The gallery called me back. Evelyn said one of the critics who had seen my work, thinking it was Natalie's, wanted to meet me. He was impressed. He didn't care about the drama. He wanted to know the real artist. I didn't know what to say. My hands trembled as I held the phone, realizing that maybe, just maybe, something good was starting to grow from this chaos, something that belonged to me. I agreed to meet him, not because I wanted fame, but because I wanted to take back my voice. I had stayed in the shadows for too long. Natalie had taken the spotlight, but I was ready to step into it myself. As I prepared for that meeting, I looked at the canvas in front of me. A new one, blank, waiting. And for the first time in weeks, I picked up my brush again. When I stepped into the gallery again, everything felt different. The last time I was there, I was invisible, watching my own work being credited to someone else. This time, I walked in with my head high, shoulders back, my portfolio in my bag, and my name on my lips. I was nervous, of course, but there was also something electric in the air, like I was reclaiming something sacred. I wasn't just showing my art, I was showing them who I really was. No masks, no pretending, no more stolen identity. Evelyn greeted me at the front, her usual sharp expression softened slightly. She led me through the back hallway into a small office, where a man in his late 30s stood waiting. He had kind eyes and wore a blazer over a graphic tee with a vintage camera print. His name was Thomas Gray, an independent art critic and scout for a digital art collective. He smiled when he saw me and immediately offered his hand. "So you're the mystery artist," he said. "I've been waiting to meet the real you." I sat down across from him, my heart racing. He asked about my influences, my techniques, what emotions I try to channel through my work. He listened like it mattered, nodding at the right moments, sometimes pausing just to really look at what I had to say. I showed him the same pieces that had been in the show, the stolen ones. But this time, I told the story behind each one. The girl with flowers in her eyes? That was about my struggle with anxiety. The one of the ocean swallowing a city. My fear of being overwhelmed. These weren't just pretty pictures. They were pieces of me. Thomas seemed genuinely moved. He complimented the details, the layering of colors, the intentional chaos in my brushwork. Then he leaned forward and asked a question I didn't expect. "Would you be willing to work with us on a feature? Something raw and honest. Your story, your art side by side." I froze for a second. Was he serious? I'd gone from being erased to being invited to tell my truth in front of thousands. I nodded, too stunned to speak. He handed me a card and said they'd be in touch within the week. I thanked him, and when I stepped outside, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Back home, the tension with Natalie hadn't changed. We barely looked at each other. She walked around the house like a storm cloud, slamming doors, muttering under her breath. Mom and Dad had picked up on it, but neither of us had explained yet. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came to the surface. And sure enough, 2 days later it did. Over dinner, we were all seated at the table passing food when Mom casually mentioned the gallery show. "Natalie," she said, "we were so proud of you that night, but your name hasn't shown up in any of the follow-up articles." "That's odd, isn't it?" Natalie froze. I glanced up, fork halfway to my mouth. Dad chimed in, confused. "Didn't that critic want to interview you?" Natalie fumbled with her napkin, then shot me a glare. "Maybe they got bored. Or maybe someone sabotaged it," she muttered. That was it. I put down my fork and looked straight at my parents. "I need to tell you something." Natalie's eyes widened, silently begging me not to. But I didn't stop. I told them everything. How she had stolen my paintings. How she submitted them under her name. How I confronted her. And how the gallery confirmed the truth. I even showed them the video and the emails from Thomas. My voice shook, but I didn't cry. I was done crying. The silence at the table was deafening. Mom's face turned pale. Dad looked between us, confused, like he couldn't believe it. Natalie tried to defend herself, saying she was just trying to help, that I was too shy, that it was all blown out of proportion. But the evidence was too clear, too solid. Mom stood up and told her to leave the table. Natalie stormed off, slamming her door behind her. I sat there, feeling exhausted and relieved at the same time. My parents looked at me, stunned. And for the first time, I think they really saw me. The next few days were quiet. Natalie avoided me completely. My parents tried to be supportive, but I could tell they were still processing everything. I focused on my art, working late into the night on new pieces for the digital collective. I poured everything I was feeling into the canvas: grief, betrayal, hope. I was rebuilding myself with every brushstroke. Then, one afternoon, I got an email. It was from Thomas. The headline read, "Ready to go live?" They were launching my feature that weekend. A full interview, a gallery of my artwork, and even a short video with clips from the footage I had submitted. I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding. This was it. My name, my story. Finally, when the article went live, I didn't expect what happened next. Comments flooded in, people connecting with my art, praising the honesty of my journey, sharing their own stories of being overshadowed, silenced, stolen from. It was overwhelming in the best way. Teachers at school congratulated me. Even students I barely knew came up to say how powerful the feature was. For the first time, I wasn't just the girl who liked to draw. I was an artist, a real one. Natalie saw it too. I knew because I caught her scrolling through the post on her phone, her face blank. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I saw the shame in her eyes. Maybe even regret. I didn't gloat. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her, holding my sketchbook tight to my chest. I didn't need revenge. I had something better, recognition. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. There were still things left unsaid, wounds that hadn't healed. And a part of me still wondered, why had she done it? What had driven her to cross that line? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But something told me that until I faced that part of the truth, I'd never really be free from it. And that moment was coming faster than I expected. The days after the article went live felt like stepping into a new world. For the first time, I was being seen, not just by strangers, but by people who had never noticed me before. Teachers were asking me about my work. A local art supply store offered to sponsor materials for my next project. I even got invited to speak on a panel for young creatives. It was surreal, like the world was finally turning to face me. But behind all the praise and messages, there was still one voice I hadn't heard, the one that had once mattered most. Natalie's. I knew she'd read the article. I saw her scrolling, pausing, biting her lip. She never said anything. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't apologize. She barely looked at me. It was like we were strangers living under the same roof. Part of me was angry, furious that she could walk around as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't tried to erase me. But another part of me felt empty. I missed the sister I used to know, before all of this, before jealousy turned her into someone I didn't recognize. One night I heard her crying through the wall, soft at first, then louder, like she'd been holding it in for days. I sat on my bed, hugging my knees, torn between knocking on her door and pretending I hadn't heard. She'd hurt me so deeply, but I couldn't pretend I didn't care. No matter how angry I was, she was still my sister. The sound of her sobs twisted something inside me. She wasn't just the villain in my story. She was broken too. And maybe we both needed to face the truth, together. The next day, I found her in the kitchen, staring into a cup of cold coffee. She looked tired, eyes red and puffy, hair messy. I sat down across from her without saying a word. She didn't look up. I waited. After a long silence, she finally spoke. I didn't think it would go this far. Her voice was barely a whisper. I wanted to feel important, like I mattered. I kept my eyes on her, letting her talk. "You've always had this world," she said, gesturing vaguely. "This beautiful, emotional world that everyone respects. I've always had to try harder, smile more, impress people. And I saw your paintings and they were amazing. I wanted to be amazing too." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long feeling invisible. I hadn't seen that she was struggling to be seen too. "But you could have been amazing in your own way," I said, my voice shaking. "You didn't have to take what was mine." She nodded slowly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I know, and I'm sorry. I really am. I just didn't think you'd fight back." That made me flinch a little. She thought I'd stay silent, that I'd let it happen. Maybe I had taught her that, by always being quiet, always stepping aside. But not anymore. She looked up at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a while, genuine remorse. "I can't undo it," she said, "but I want to make it right, if you'll let me." I didn't know what making it right would look like. The damage was done, but I nodded anyway, not because I forgave her completely, but because I wanted to start healing. For both of us. A few days later, Natalie reached out to the gallery herself. She spoke to Evelyn and sent a letter of apology, publicly acknowledging that the work had never been hers. The gallery added a correction to the original exhibition catalog, crediting me properly. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't go viral, but it meant everything to me. It was the truth, finally printed where it belonged. Around that same time, I started getting interview requests, small podcasts, art blogs, even a local newspaper. They all wanted to talk about my journey, how I'd gone from invisible to recognized. And in each interview, I told the truth, not just about the betrayal, but about the silence, the fear of not being good enough, the pressure to stay small, and how choosing to speak up changed everything. I wasn't trying to ruin Natalie. I was trying to reclaim myself. One interview caught more attention than the others. A producer from a documentary series about young artists contacted me, asking if I'd be interested in being featured. They loved the emotional arc of my story, the talent, the betrayal, the comeback. At first I hesitated. It felt so vulnerable, so public. But then I remembered how many messages I had gotten from people who had gone through similar things. Maybe this wasn't just my story. Maybe it was bigger than me, so I said yes. The filming started 2 weeks later. They came to my school, my room, even the gallery. I showed them my sketchbooks, my studio process, my unfinished works. Natalie stayed away during the shoots, but I could feel her watching from a distance. I wondered if it made her feel proud, or just guilty. Maybe both. As the documentary unfolded, I realized something else. I wasn't just healing. I was evolving. My art became more confident, more daring. I stopped hiding behind what was expected and started creating what I truly felt. Pain, beauty, growth. It all went onto the canvas. One of the producers told me I had a rare emotional fingerprint, something that couldn't be faked or stolen. That line stuck with me. One evening, after a long day of filming, I found Natalie sitting on my bed, holding one of my sketchbooks. I froze in the doorway, unsure if I should ask her to leave. But she looked up and said, "You're really good, you know. Better than I ever gave you credit for." I sat beside her, unsure of what to say. She handed me the book, then pulled something from her pocket, a small crumpled paper. "I wrote this for the documentary. If you want to include it, you can." It was a handwritten note, a confession, an apology. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't make excuses. She just told the truth. I read it silently, my throat tight. I didn't say anything. I just folded it and tucked it into the back of my journal. I didn't know if I'd use it, but I knew I'd remember it. Time passed. Slowly, the cracks in our relationship began to mend. Not completely, not perfectly, but with honesty, with effort. And that was enough for now. The documentary aired a month later and was received better than I expected. I got letters from across the country, people who felt seen because I had spoken up. I had gone from being voiceless to being a voice, and I wasn't planning to let that go. There was still so much ahead. So much I didn't know. But I had my brushes, my story, and my name. And this time, I wasn't afraid to use them. By the time the documentary went viral, everything changed. Not just my life, but how people saw me. Overnight, I went from being a local high school artist to someone whose name was being mentioned on art forums, blogs, and even news segments. They weren't just talking about my paintings, they were talking about my story. About how I stood up when someone I loved tried to take away my voice. I was proud, yes. But I was also exhausted. The weight of being the brave girl who spoke out started to press down on me in unexpected ways. At school, the attention was overwhelming. Kids I'd never spoken to before were suddenly trying to sit with me at lunch, asking about my process, telling me how inspiring I was. Teachers stopped me in the hallways to say how proud they were, and while part of me appreciated it, another part of me missed being invisible. Art had always been my quiet space, my way of processing the world without having to speak. But now it felt like everyone wanted me to perform, to constantly be the artist. Natalie, on the other hand, had vanished from the spotlight. Her social media went quiet. She dropped out of a few extracurriculars and avoided going anywhere people might recognize her. I knew she was hurting, and part of me wanted to check on her. But I also knew she needed time. We had started talking again, but only about small things. Weather, groceries, school, the deeper conversations were still waiting. Like a storm hanging just behind the horizon. One afternoon, I came home to find a large envelope on my bed. Inside was a letter from a prestigious art institute. They had seen the documentary and were offering me a scholarship to attend their summer program. Fully paid, I stared at the paper for a long time, heart pounding. This was everything I had dreamed of. A chance to study under professionals, to grow, to finally feel like I belonged in the art world. But alongside the joy came fear. Leaving home, being around people more talented than me, and leaving Natalie behind. That night, I found her in the living room, curled up with a blanket, watching a show she didn't seem interested in. I sat down next to her and handed her the letter. She read it slowly, her eyes widening. "You're going?" she asked quietly. I shrugged. "I want to, but I don't know." She looked at me, really looked, and said something I didn't expect. "You have to go. You earned this, and I'll be okay." Her voice cracked on that last word, but she smiled through it. It was the first time in months I felt like I had my sister back. Over the next few weeks, we talked more. Late-night conversations, quiet walks around the neighborhood, cooking meals together like we used to. Slowly, the walls between us began to fall. She even helped me put together my portfolio for the program. She didn't touch any of the art, just gave feedback, helped organize, kept me company while I painted late into the night. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of silence, tension, but it was real, and that mattered more than perfection. Before I left for the institute, something unexpected happened. Natalie asked if she could speak at my school's end-of-year assembly. At first, I was nervous. What if she said something that made things worse? But when she stepped on stage and faced the crowd, she didn't flinch. She told the truth, all of it. She admitted to stealing my art, to lying, to the reasons behind it. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for sympathy. She just stood there and owned her actions. The room was silent when she finished. Then, surprisingly, someone clapped. Then another, and another, not because they approved of what she did, but because they saw the courage it took to admit it. I watched from the audience, heart in my throat. That moment didn't erase the past, but it helped shape the future. For both of us, when the day came to leave for the institute, I packed my brushes, my sketchbooks, and the letter that started it all. Natalie drove me to the train station. We didn't say much during the ride, just sat in comfortable silence. When it was time to say goodbye, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Don't let anyone steal your voice again. Not even me." I held on to those words as I boarded the train, feeling the weight of everything we had been through and the possibilities waiting ahead. The institute was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Massive studios, endless supplies, instructors who pushed me to dig deeper, to go beyond aesthetics and find meaning. I was surrounded by other young artists, all brilliant in their own ways. At first, I felt intimidated, but then I remembered what brought me here. My story, my resilience, my art. I started creating pieces that were louder, bolder, more raw. One of my instructors said, "You paint like you've lived 10 lives." Maybe I had. As the summer unfolded, I kept a journal of my experiences. Not just drawings, but words. Memories, reflections, letters I never sent. I wrote about Natalie, about loss, about finding my name again. It became a second voice, one I didn't know I needed. And by the end of the program, I realized something powerful. I wasn't just telling a story. I was becoming one. When I returned home, things were different, quieter, steadier. Natalie was working part-time, thinking about going back to school for something she actually cared about. We still had our awkward moments, but there was respect now. And underneath all the hurt, a kind of love that had been forged through fire. One evening, she came into my room holding something behind her back. "I made something," she said nervously. She handed me a small canvas, her first attempt at painting. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And more importantly, it was hers. I smiled and told her it was beautiful. We hung it on the wall next to mine, side by side. Different styles, different voices, but both real. And that was enough. The quiet that settled over our house after everything felt unfamiliar but not unwelcome. It was a calm that didn't carry tension, only a shared understanding that we had crossed something painful and come out the other side. Scarred maybe, but still standing. Natalie and I weren't best friends, not like we were when we were kids, but we were rebuilding, bit by bit. And in that silence, something new was taking root. Respect. I spent most of my time painting again. But it wasn't like before. My art had changed. I had changed. I wasn't creating just to escape anymore. I was creating to confront. Every canvas became a conversation. Some were angry, some were hopeful, but all of them were honest. And for the first time, I didn't hide them. I posted my work online, shared my process, talked about the meaning behind each piece. I wasn't afraid to be seen anymore. One of my pieces caught the attention of a local gallery again. This time, they reached out directly to me. They were hosting an exhibit on Voices of the Next Generation and wanted to feature my work. I stared at the email for nearly 10 minutes before I could believe it was real. Not only was I going to be part of it, they wanted me to headline the show. My name, my face, my truth. No shadows, no confusion, no borrowed identities. The night of the opening arrived faster than I expected. The gallery buzzed with voices and camera clicks. People moving from canvas to canvas with drinks in hand and awe in their eyes. I stood near the entrance, dressed simply, my sketchbook tucked under my arm like a shield. My heart was racing, but not with fear, with adrenaline. I had worked for this moment. I had earned it. Natalie came too. She walked in quietly, avoiding the center of attention, but I saw her smile when she spotted my work on the walls. She came over, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "You did it." I nodded, trying not to cry. I was too proud for tears tonight. As guests moved through the exhibit, I found myself drawn into conversation after conversation. Some people asked about my technique. Others asked about the emotions behind the pieces, but most wanted to talk about the story, the betrayal, the forgiveness, the fire that had lit my path. I spoke openly, not to dramatize it, but because I realized how many people related to the feeling of being silenced, erased, doubted. And maybe, by telling my truth, I gave them permission to tell theirs. Toward the end of the night, a girl around my age approached me. She was shy, her voice barely above a whisper, but her eyes were full of something fierce. "I saw your documentary," she said. "My brother used to take credit for my songs, said I wasn't ready to perform. I stopped writing for a year, but your story, it made me want to try again." I hugged her. I didn't need to say anything. We both understood. Later that evening, Natalie surprised me again. She asked if she could say a few words to the crowd. I hesitated, unsure if this was the right time, but she seemed nervous, not performative. I nodded. The curator handed her the microphone, and the room fell quiet. Natalie took a breath, then began. "A few months ago, I made a terrible mistake. I stole something that didn't belong to me, not just art, but identity. I let my insecurity turn into something ugly. But I've watched my sister rise from that betrayal, not just stronger, but kinder. Her forgiveness gave me the courage to face what I did. And tonight, I just want to say, I'm proud to be her sister. And I'm learning, finally, to be proud of myself, too." There was a quiet ripple of applause. No loud cheers, just a warm, steady sound. I looked around and saw people nodding, eyes glistening. Not just for me, but for the story, for the humanity of it all, for the imperfection that somehow made us real. After the exhibit, we walked home in the cool night air. Natalie joked about how nervous she'd been. I teased her about how she used to steal my fries, and now apparently also my career. She laughed, rolled her eyes, and promised to stick to her own dreams from now on. It felt good, natural, like we were finding our rhythm again. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of messages, some from new fans, some from schools inviting me to speak, one from a publisher asking if I'd ever considered turning my story into a book. The idea terrified me and thrilled me. Could I really tell it all from the beginning in my own words? I spent the day thinking about it, about everything I'd been through, the silence, the fire, the moment I decided not to disappear. I opened my sketchbook that night, but instead of drawing, I began to write. Just a few lines at first, then a few pages. My voice, once so quiet, now filled the room. Natalie peeked in, saw me writing, and didn't say anything. She just smiled, then closed the door gently behind her. No pressure, no expectations, just understanding. And as I wrote, I realized something important. The real power wasn't just in taking back my story. It was in choosing how it ended, or rather how it continued, because I wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. The book came faster than I expected. What started as a few pages of thoughts turned into chapters. Long nights at my desk, pouring memories onto paper, reliving moments I had tried to forget. It wasn't easy. Some chapters made me cry, others made me smile, but each one felt like a piece of me I had buried, finally coming back to the surface. The writing wasn't just about telling the world what happened. It was about telling myself the truth, and finally being able to hold it without fear. Natalie read the first draft. I didn't ask her to. She saw the pages on my desk and quietly started reading while I was at school. I came home to find her sitting on the floor of my room, the printouts spread around her, eyes red. She looked up and said, "You remembered everything." I nodded. Of course I did. We didn't talk much that night, but something in her eyes told me she was finally facing what I had felt all along. The publisher loved the manuscript. They said it was raw, real, and unlike anything they'd read from someone my age. They offered a contract, a release plan, and a professional editor to help me shape the final version. I signed the papers with shaky hands, my parents filming the moment with proud tears in their eyes. It felt surreal. I had gone from sketching in secret to becoming the author of my own story. Literally. When the cover design came in, I cried. It featured one of my paintings, the very first one Natalie stole, now proudly marked with my full name. The image of the girl with flowers in her eyes had come full circle. No longer a symbol of pain, but of growth, of beauty that bloomed even through betrayal. The publisher planned a book tour, and to my surprise, invited Natalie to be part of it. Not as a co-author, but as a speaker, someone who could talk about what it means to make amends, to stand in the aftermath of your own mistakes. We talked about it for hours. She was hesitant, scared of being judged, but in the end she said yes. Not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted to be part of the healing. And she was. At each stop, she stood beside me and answered the hard questions. She didn't dodge blame. She didn't sugarcoat. She told the truth, even when it hurt. And because of that, people listened. They forgave. By the time the book hit bestseller lists, everything had changed. I was still me, still painting, still walking to school with headphones in, still needing quiet spaces. But I wasn't hiding anymore. People knew my name. They knew my story. And they knew the art behind it. I started getting letters from readers around the world. Girls who had lost their voices. Boys who were overshadowed by siblings. Artists who thought they weren't enough. They all said the same thing. Thank you for speaking when I couldn't. With the money from the book, I applied to my dream art school. I got in. I used the rest to set up a scholarship in my old high school. For students like me, quiet ones, who had something to say but didn't know how yet. I named it after my grandfather, the one who gave me my first easel. Natalie helped design the logo. We both cried when the first recipient was announced. As time passed, our lives settled into something steady and real. Natalie found her own path, not in art, but in counseling. She wanted to help other teens who felt lost, insecure, like she once did. She said my story helped her find hers. I believed her. She moved into a small apartment across town, but came over every Sunday for dinner. We still teased each other, fought over music, shared clothes, but there was something new now, trust. One evening we sat on the back porch, watching the sky turn gold and pink. She turned to me and said, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? The stealing, the lies?" I thought about it, About the pain, the confusion, the silence. Then I shook my head. No, because it made me who I am. It taught me how to speak and how to listen. She nodded slowly, and we sat there in the quiet, letting the past be the past. The girl who once hid her paintings in a locked cabinet was gone. In her place stood someone unafraid to create, to speak, to take up space. I wasn't just an artist anymore. I was a survivor, a storyteller, a sister. And every time I picked up a brush, I remembered the lesson that changed everything. No one gets to write your name but you. So that's my story. How I went from being silenced in my own home to having my name, my art, and my voice recognized around the world. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No one can steal your light unless you let them. Speak up even when it's hard. Fight for your truth, and never let anyone tell your story for you. If you made it to the end, drop a comment saying I see you to let me know you're still here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. Your support means everything.